My old friend and colleague, Ari Rabin-Havt, he's the former deputy campaign manager for Bernie Sanders 2020, the former host of the show The Agenda right here on Sirius XM, the author of The Fighting Soul on the Road with Bernie Sanders. This is a brand new book, and it's an absolutely amazing story. It starts out in Ari's living room. Ari, welcome back to the program. It's been a while since we've talked. I'm curious your thoughts on how America has changed just really in the last 5 years, I would say. You had the Hillary Clinton campaign arguing that the things that Bernie Sanders was calling for in the primary 5 years ago were never going to happen, impossible. And now many, if not most of those things, yeah, they've been held up by Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema and every single Republican, but they are widely embraced by the President of the United States and the Democratic Party. How did this happen?
I mean, Thom, you remember a few years back, you and I used to chat about all those deficit hawks who we couldn't spend any money on this, we couldn't spend any money on that. And you're right, look, Joe Manchin's going to hold things up, but you have a Democratic Party willing to have a child tax credit that literally sends checks to people, which 4 years ago would have been impossible. And look, you look at that progress, it's not what we want. We want Medicare for all, we want college for all, we want a number of things. We want Social Security improved and expanded. But the just huge difference in what Bernie Sanders did for America, what his campaign did, how it changed the complete conversation in Washington from, hey, government can't do anything, to, hey, here are all the things government can do, even under, frankly, a conservative Democratic president like Joe Biden.
To what extent do you think that this is a function of Americans finally starting to realize, in part because Bernie was calling it out, but there's a whole bunch of variables here, and in fact, I'd love your take on what they may be, but the American people starting to finally realize that all of these right-wing billionaires who've been saying, oh, and funding, movements from Tea Party and everything else, saying, oh, get your government hands off my Medicare. The government can't do anything right. Government always screws it up. Bureaucrats, rah, 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 union bosses, terrible, terrible. That finally, the American people suddenly realized, oh, my God, these billionaires are getting everything they want from the government. They're being subsidized by the government. The fossil fuel industry is getting $600 billion a year from the government. The largest corporations in America are being massively subsidized by the government. Walmart comes into a community. It demands 20 years of tax abatements, massive government subsidies. And you're telling us that we can't have food stamps if we lose our job? That there, at some point, the light bulb seems to have gone off, and at some point seems to, and I've been doing this show for 19 years, that some point seems in a big way to me to have been within the last 10 years for sure, going back to Bernie's first campaign, and definitely in the last 5 years. Your thoughts?
Yeah, and I think it was a lot of people waking up and being like, wait, government can do things? Wait, a politician can be successful saying we're going to spend more money? Wait, we can have nice things. And look, we haven't gone far enough, right? We haven't won yet. There are still people like Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema holding back the Democratic Party. And by the way, that's not an excuse. I think Joe Biden, there's a lot of things more he could do, which we could talk about. But the idea that we're not even having conversations, Thom, do you remember how many conversations you and I had during the Obama years about TPP?
Oh, yeah.
Like, those conversations don't exist anymore. It is remarkable, the change that took place.
Yeah, we've gone from basically a neoliberal Democratic Party to a progressive Democratic Party. I realize there's still a bunch of neoliberals out there, but I mean, even we've got a guy here in Oregon, Kurt Schrader, who's like, a stooge for big pharma. I mean, his family comes from a big pharma fortune. And has been fighting against Medicare, negotiating drug prices, for God's sake. And he's carpet bombing his district now because he's in a primary. He's running, against a real, Jamie McLeod Skinner. Thank you, Sean. He's running against a real progressive, Bernie Sanders progressive, and he's got his back though. And he's sending out these really slick flyers that are probably paid for by the pharmaceutical industry, talking about how he's a progressive and he's fighting to secure and protect your Medicare now. I mean, it's like even the neoliberals are pretending they're progressives.
And some of that is the campaign. And look, the book itself, if I can talk about it
Please.
For 1 second, It's not a policy, Thom. Let me state that. It is really the story. As you know, I spent pretty much 4 years on the road with Bernie Sanders every day. I got to see a Bernie Sanders that many people don't know. Your audience actually might be more familiar with Bernie than everybody else, just because you had the brunch with Bernie for a decade.
Yeah, 11 years.
But there's a Bernie that I think people don't know. There's a Bernie that people should know. Who is this person? And I really get into who is Bernie, and I have a lot of stories that even people who follow him closely, will not know.
Well, share one with us.
I really hope,
if you don't mind. We're talking about Ari Rabin-Havt's new book, The Fighting Soul: On the Road with Bernie Sanders. What would you give us a taste?
Well, first, I think one story that's gotten around, but I think people will really, it helps set in context even the end of the campaign, was when Bernie went to see Barack Obama in 2018 to just discuss, hey, I'm thinking about running. He hadn't decided yet. And in the room was only Bernie, Barack Obama, and me. And at one point during the conversation, Barack Obama turned to Bernie and said, Bernie, you're an Old Testament prophet. You tell the party, you give the party kind of a moral voice, but prophets don't get to be king. Are you willing to make the choices that kings have to make? That you would, there's moments like that have never been talked about before. There's, I was in the car, the book starts out with the heart attack is kind of the first scene of the book, where it was me and only one other staffer with him throughout that period. I really kind of want to tell that story because it's a story of how resilient and how committed Bernie is to running. There's the story about the campaign, which literally the 2020 campaign began in my living room, which I happen to be sitting in right now. There's stories about Bernie's sense of humor, which is remarkable. One of my favorite stories is I got this call on my phone, and this, from somebody in LA, and they're like, Miley Cyrus is going to endorse Bernie, which she never did in this campaign, but that was the call. And it was, and I was with Bernie. He's like, what's going on? I was like, Miley Cyrus is going to endorse you. And, you don't expect Bernie to know who Miley Cyrus is. And he turns around in the car and goes, does that mean Hannah Montana will campaign in Montana for us? Okay. Just like, first off, that he knew that was remarkable. I was like, how do you know who Miley Cyrus is? And he was like, well, my grandkids, when I had to go buy them gifts, everything in the store was Hannah Montana. So I figured out who she was, which is a side of Bernie I feel like people don't get to see. There's, the what happened behind the scenes, a great story that I really love that shows the side of Bernie that people don't get to see, happened before the Detroit debate. Faz, the campaign manager, Bernie and I were sitting in his green room, and he was feeling kind of low energy. And Jeff Weaver sent us a text because we had said he looks low energy, saying, hey, read him John Delaney's press release, who sent out a press release being like, I'm going to go on stage and call Bernie a communist. And we read the press release, and Bernie turns to us and goes, do you know that Charlie Brown song? It was my favorite as a kid. We're like, what are you talking about? And he looks at us, he goes, why is everybody always picking on me? And Baz, at which point, starts playing the song on his iPhone, and Bernie literally gets up and starts dancing around the room and airboxing, and like gets pumped up. And to have a Bernie to the closing scene of the campaign, which kind of bookends that, where the world is shutting down because of COVID. It's March 10th. We're in Detroit, and we're supposed to fly to Ohio for a rally, but we're kind of paused on the ground because it's questionable whether that rally should take place. And we're kind of holding in Ohio, and we have like 2 hours on the campaign, which was unheard of. And we ended up at two museums. The second museum was the Motown Museum, and Bernie ends up in the original Barry Gordy recording studio duetting on My Girl with the tour guide there. And it's the one time during the campaign, because I have numerous pictures that I took, which are in this book, by the way, a lot of pictures that I took on the road, and some other people's pictures who graciously allowed me to put their pictures in too from the campaign. Their pictures in there too, but there's a picture I took where he turned to me and goes, please take a picture of this, which was the only time he did, of him in the original Motown recording studio, because that's like the place of his youth. And there are so many scenes with Bernie like that, and I'm very happy people have said this book is not only like a factual read, but an enjoyable one. It
really and truly is. The book is The Fighting Soul: On the Road with Bernie Sanders by Ari Rabin-Havt.